Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Vista Solutions Q&A Café on navigating the financial cockpit in SAP Business ByDesign with our host, Thomas Robson. My name is Leo and I'll be facilitating today. And just to let you know, we will be recording this session, so everyone will remain on mute. And this recording will be sent out next week. If you have any questions throughout, please type them in the questions or chat box window at any time, and we'll get to those near the end of the presentation. Please join us next week also for our Q&A Cafe on Wednesday, July 21st, and that'll be on enhancements to V10 SAP Business ByDesign or Business One, including mobile and SAP Business One. You can find the registration information about that on our resources page, on our website, or in the email sent out next week. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Thomas.
Thanks, Leo, and thank you to everyone in attendance here today for the Q&A Cafe in the Financial Cockpit in SAP Business ByDesign. Before I begin, I'd like to go over a bit of an agenda of what I'll be covering here in today's session. First, I'll briefly introduce myself, and then I'll address the question, what is a closing cockpit and who is it for? And then I'll highlight some of the key benefits of the closing cockpit. And then I'd like to move into the system and give a brief demonstration of the functionality. And then we'll come back to the slides for a recap. And then we'll, as Leo's mentioned, I'll be checking the chat window for the duration of the session. So, drop any questions that you have, and I'll try to answer them as they come. But if I do miss some, I'll leave some time at the end to go over them. So on that note, let's jump in. So who am I? My name is Thomas Robson. I'm a Business ByDesign consultant here at Vista Solutions. I recently graduated from Dillon School of Business with a degree in finance and economics. I have SAP ByDesign background in finance, accounting, reporting basics, and master data configuration. And this is actually my first ever Q&A cafe. So I guess on that note, let's go for it. So what is the closing cockpit? The closing cockpit is a central location for all year or period end closing activities where users can define the closing tasks, the sequence, as well as monitor the status of the financial closing. The closing cockpit basically serves as a function in SAP ByDesign that helps manage the end-to-end closing process. So from completing operational transactions and the required postings to submitting reports to tax authorities through the creation of financial statements. So who is it for? Well, the cockpit is geared towards companies who are looking to meet financial filing deadlines quickly and efficiently, or it's for controllers or CFOs, as it allows them to monitor month-end tasks and their completion. Alternatively, it's also for companies who want to achieve better transparency and compliance, as well as aid in increasing investor confidence. The departments responsible for this, of course, would be the finance department, with accountants being the main user. So some of the key benefits. So the closing cockpit offers a central and standardized closing procedure, which ensures the integration of each individual statement and activity. It offers reconciliation capabilities to prove the consistency across different business areas. So this scenario basically aligns payables and receivables, tax and inventory accounting, and management and general ledger accounting. It provides access to an up-to-date comprehensive overview of the status, which ultimately promotes transparency for all levels of finance. And it provides employees the ability to define closing tasks and their sequence well in advance, which aids in supporting regulatory compliance and minimizes the risk of missing important steps. So on that note, I'd like to jump into the system to give a brief demonstration here. So from here, from our Launchpad, we want to navigate to the General Ledger Work Center. From there, we'll navigate to the closing cockpit here. So this is basically, it takes you right to this monitor screen, which basically shows you the status of all closing cockpits that have been created. Currently, it looks a little messy. This is a test environment, so obviously nobody closes out their period end or year end. But the idea is still the same. The screen really just acts as a portal for each month-end closing cockpit that's been created. So let's start by creating a new closing cockpit. So we'll hit new. It gives you two choices to create a period end close and create a period end close with reference. So if you select period end close, you basically create a new cockpit with the out-of-the-box sequence of activities that SAP provides. And if you choose to create a period end close with reference, you're actually referencing an existing closing cockpit. So what you can do is you can highlight that and select period end close with reference. And here it pulls out all the information from that previous financial cockpit. So the company, the set of books, the period, and it also pulls the next available period that needs to be closed out. So seeing as we're not closing out January, we are closing out February. Let's just add that in the description. You can assign an employee responsible for the entire cockpit. I'm just going to leave it blank so it'll automatically assign to myself. And then you can select a date. So just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to select today's date. You hit save and close. I'm going to hit the refresh button so it appears. So now we've basically created a closing cockpit. So as you can see, this is kind of the monitor view. You can see the tasks that have not been started, the tasks that are in process, not ready, overdue, as well as you can see a list of the next activities that need to be completed. So let's start by, let's drill into it. Let's take a deep dive into it here. So basically from this screen, you can see a list of all the activities that need to be completed in order to complete your financial closing. I'm going to start at the top just for simplicity's sake. I'm going to highlight some of the important features. So on this little tab here, you can navigate to the changes. This is kind of useful in sort of an administrative sense. You know, you can look to see who's made changes in specific dates, filter, see which users made changes. So it kind of gives you that flexibility for administrative purposes or even for validation purposes if you want to validate who's made changes. So we'll go back to the period end closing. Here you can see it's kind of the detailed view of everything that we filled out. So we have the description, employee responsible, the due date. We can kind of change this at this view as well. So down here, there's a button for exporting. So you can actually open this and export this list to Excel. It'll download this list to Excel. And it kind of comes up in this view. It's just more or less a list of what's been completed, not started, not started, not started. I think it's worth mentioning that you can't make changes to this list and then import it back into the system. So this kind of serves as an external checklist. So the system does have this kind of functionality if you do need it. Let's exit out of here. And then another element that's worth noting here is the ability to generate reports inside of this view. So you click on the reports button and you have both a GL accounts line items reports and a trial balance. So if we click on one, it's actually auto-filled all of the information that we filled out initially. It's done that for you. So I know that a GL accounts line item report is really useful for reconciliation purposes. So it does have this time-saving feature because to find this report, you'd have to go into your general ledger and then manually create this selection and view here. Another key element here is that you can actually download this report to Microsoft Excel if you want to further manipulate this data. So let's exit out of here. And as I was saying, the same thing happens for a report on your trial balance. It just autofills your company, your set of books. It's also worth noting that you have to create a individual closing cockpit for each set of books and for each company. So that can be kind of cumbersome, but the ability to reference your closing cockpits makes that a much easier element. So now we come to the kind of the list of our activities here. So there's a big list here. You know, there's a whole bunch of tasks you can do. So let's say, you know, for this one task, close accounting periods for operational postings. You can click execute and it'll take you directly to that activity. And even further, it's highlighted the period in which you need to close. So it's just another time-saving function that takes you directly there. So let's say you've completed that. You can kind of close out of here. You can mark it as completed. You know, so if you go back to the monitor view, hit refresh, it'll now indicate 1 out of 36 tasks completed, and it shows the next activity to be completed. So let's go back in here. This functionality also works for the other options here. So, you know, let's say you're starting step 2, set process control, and you get sidetracked, you can set it to in process. And when you go back to monitor, so let's say, you know, whoever's overseeing this closing, they can see that there's been an activity set to in process. So let's go back in here. You also have the ability to change who the task is assigned to. So I can assign this to, you know, Edward Black, let's say, which is quite handy for individual tasks. You know, assigning different members of your team to different tasks. So another element that's important here. Step 3 here, it says data flow for verification and technical consistency check. You come over here and there's no execute button. So basically, SAP is recommending completing a consistency check. However, the system does not have that functionality. So if this is something that's not relevant to you, you can just as easily mark this as not relevant. So when you create another financial closing cockpit with reference, it will not pull across this step, which makes things smoother, makes things faster for financial closing. Another key element here is that each step has the ability to add attachments. So you can add an attachment simply by clicking the paperclip, go file. You know, you can browse your local computer, specify the document type here, add some internal comments. So that's it for attachments. Really, it's pretty helpful. Another thing worth mentioning is you can move tasks up and down. So if I want to move this task, I hit the little cog icon, and I can hit move up. I can also move things down. Another thing you can do is you can insert a manual activity. It's worth noting here that this doesn't actually, you can't actually assign an activity, a system functionality in here. It's more or less just a manual activity. So processor, you know, it'll be Edward Black, and you can say, you know, send income statement to the bank. And you can set a due date for, you know, a couple days in advance. And one of the last things I kind of want to mention here, the last couple of things I want to mention, there's a couple of activities that allow you to run things in test run before actually running the activity themselves. So you can run it and test to provide some verification or to have some oversight. And then you can run the job and test, oversee what's happening, and then execute the task. And the last thing I want to mention here is that there's a couple activities that are a little tricky here. So if you look at this one, it says accruals, accrued vacation time, and you can hit execute. It kind of looks like the system has functionality to handle accruals here. However, when you hit execute, it just takes you to a manual journal entry voucher. This is kind of SAP's workaround for dealing with accruals. So there's about 4 or 5 of these activities. It's just something to remember that the system doesn't actually have a way to deal with accruals. It just provides a solution, but they recommend that you do complete your accruals. So that's it for the activities. So once you've completed all of your closing activities, you should be able to go back to the monitor screen, and it'll look like this, completely grayed out. No in process, no started, no. It'll all be grayed out. So that's the end of the demo here. Let's jump back into the slides for a recap. So a recap of the slides. What is the closing cockpit? Well, the closing cockpit is a central location for all year or period end closing activities, where users can define the closing steps, their sequence, as well as monitor the status of the financial closing. So what are the key benefits? You can track tasks that need to be completed for each month end. It allows you to order tasks based on dependencies. You can assign individual tasks and have them track whether it's started or completed. And you can customize by adding or removing tasks. And a recap of the demo, we went through how to create a closing cockpit with reference and without. The one thing that's important to note is you must create a separate closing cockpit, each company and each set of books. We looked at how to assign users to closing activities, how to change and monitor the status of these activities, as well as how to manually add activities into the closing cockpit. And one of the last things we looked at was how some activities do not have the system process to handle those activities. So SAP provides what they recommend as a workaround. So that is the end of my presentation here. If there are any questions, I'll keep an eye on the chat box. I'd be happy to address them.
There are 2 questions, Thomas. The first one is, do we have to go back and create closing cockpit for prior periods before we knew about this feature, or can we start it at any time?
I believe you can start it at any time as long as you don't reference a existing cockpit, right? You won't be able to do that. So you'll have to create a period and close, specify the period in which you're going to close out, and then you'd have to customize kind of your steps and your activities in how it's going to flow. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, great. And the second question here is, can you complete activities out of sequence, or do you need to follow the predefined activity flow?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's move back into the system, I guess, to answer that one. So if I go back to the cockpit that we created, you can see that there's this column here, prerequisites fulfilled. So some of the activities indicate that there's a prerequisite fulfilled no, meaning that it cannot be completed until the prerequisite has been completed. So like here, I can just hit complete here, and now it's saying prerequisite fulfilled. Since the cockpit serves as basically a human checklist and has no no tie to the system. There's no, the system doesn't have a way of knowing which tasks have been completed. It's just based on what you've clicked. You can always just set activities to complete in order to access ones that are not. So yeah, that would be, yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, great. Thanks, Thomas, for a great Q&A cafe. If anyone has any lingering questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your customer executive or our support team. I want to thank everyone who attended today, and don't forget to join us next week, July 21st, for our next Q&A cafe. That'll be on enhancements to V10 SAP Business One, including mobile and SAP Business One. As mentioned before, the recording from the session will be sent out within a few days, and we look forward to seeing you on our next one. Have a great day, everyone.